Hello, welcome everyone. Today we have our another new episode. We will discuss on making our society more equal. I want to give chance Mr. Rob as a moderator to run this program. We have some important meeting because Mr. Home Stoner is coming to Bangladesh. Tom Rose coming to Bangladesh, so we are preparing something. So Mr. Rob, you take the lead. Thank you.
Okay, I guess I'm moderator then. Thanks for the heads up on that. So anyway, I'll do a quick opening, then I'll pass over to David Smith. So creating equality, equality or any measure of quality is a difficult thing to measure. The what is or what would be equal. We clearly understand what a lack of equality is and differentiation between races, sexes, and the rest, but the ability to measure quality has been problematic for a long period of time. Going back to the beginning of the United States of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, that was an effort to create quality at the job level, but the fundamental flaw in the overall plan was the fact that education was unequal. And so what was happening is people, minorities in particular, weren't getting the education they needed, so they weren't competitive in the workplace. And so coming up with the EOC, which forced equal hiring, didn't address the education problem, and actually exacerbated the kind of discrimination that had been going on in the past, because instead of showcasing that minorities could perform equal to the majority, it inflamed the situation and showcased the minorities couldn't perform as well, and that was largely because education was failing them. Without the adequate education and training, doesn't matter what sex or race you are, you're not going to perform well against somebody that's had that education and training. And so when trying to solve a problem of equality, you really need to go to the root cause. What is causing the lack of equality at the tail end? And then what are you going to fix? If you focus on things like trying to create equality in wealth, you may be trading off equality and quality of life. A lot of us have experienced looking at folks that have lots of wealth and compared them to people that work for a living, and found that the people that work for a living are inherently happier than the people that have a lot of wealth. And so if you solve an equality problem by just introducing wealth, invariably the quality of life may in fact degrade for the overall population because you didn't get to the root cause. So fixing an equality problem is very difficult. The definition of what equality would be is difficult. How you measure quality is difficult. And then how you solve an equality differentiation is problematic, because you have to go to the root causes. At the very least, a lot of analysis is required before making a decision to solve the issue, because you first have to define the problem before you come up with a solution for it. So that's my opening. I'll now pass over to David Smith to carry it forward.
Hey, Rob. Thank you. Just a heads up, our region has had some real internet issues, and I might for us.
Yep, you're breaking up quite a bit.
Yeah. Let me see if I can do this. Rob, why don't you let's pass to her, and let me reboot and see if I can get back in cleaner.
Sounds good. Okay, DC, you're up.
Okay. Hi, everybody.
Wait a minute. I can't get back in without Sharif. Never mind. Let me see what I can do here.
Shall we wait?
No, DC, you're up. We'll come back to David in a minute. He's got to try to fix his system.
Right,
keep on going, Rob. I'm just going to reboot my router real quick.
Fantastic. Hi, everybody. I'm Dawn Simmons, Tom. And my take on the topic of equality, I really like what you're saying, Rob, about equality shouldn't be measured by wealth alone, and you can have wealth and not happiness. So happiness, balance, the ability to be able to support your family at the level that's required, these are things that really raise the case for why equality is necessary. With International Women's Day just taking place last month, we actually had a very detailed discussion on how to introduce equality into the service management workspace. Women make up, for example, women make up over 50% of the money that's spent in our economy today, and yet they are incredibly underrepresented in the C-level suite of Fortune 500 companies across the US. If less than 10% of women are represented in the C-level boards, and yet they are spending that much, is this because their happiness dictates that they'd rather have time than money? Or is it that they're not able to achieve those opportunities given the same level of education? If it were just the case of choice, I think that we wouldn't need to have the discussion on making our societies more equal. I think the place that we need to come to, however, is it's not even just gender-based equality. It's gender, religion, where you're from. We need to be able to create a culture of common respect and inclusion, where everyone has a voice at the table, and that voice helps to shape our discussions and the way we create services, solutions, and spend money. That's my take on it.
Well, since we've lost David, I have no way to get him back. I think what we're going to try to do is drift this into a discussion. The idea of creating inclusion, having everybody at the table, sometimes is problematic because there are people that come to the table that only come to the table to disrupt. It's not a sex or race thing. It's just certain people have personalities that make them problematic in group settings. And so the underlying concept of having everybody at the table, at least in theory, is strong, but there has to be some level of control so that the people that are allowed at the table are there to help and move the project forward, not there to disrupt or kill the project. Now, be aware that sometimes the project needs to be killed. I mean, if you're working on something that should have a dead end and it should be dead ended, and one person raises their hand and said, we really shouldn't be doing this, then instead of perhaps removing them from the panel, maybe they should be listened to see if their arguments are valid. But those are the kinds of issues we deal with in terms of equality, is really assuring that the people that have voice, that are given voice, use it responsibly, and the people that deny others voice don't do so punitively and wrongfully, so that all you get is a bunch of people that agree on something, and you don't get the diversity of views, and it's a tough balance.
It is, and I think that's where the art, or the delicate art there, is creating that culture where you can disagree and have a meaningful discussion, but you also can include and gather the input from all that are at the table. Loudest opinion is not always the best. So yeah, we need to be able to capture the passionate disruptors, as well as the quieter, but probably very observing of the nature of a project and what can be done to move that. It's not so much about social styles, it's about creating a culture where you're able to really explore a solution and make a decision as a group for what is the best possible outcomes.
Yeah, and that kind of means that whoever is leading the overall effort needs to have really strong moderation skills and interpersonal skills, because sometimes it's not so much the person that disagrees that speaks up that's the issue, it's the person that disagrees and doesn't speak up that becomes the issue.
Yeah, you're right.
And being able to draw them out and getting their inclusion, because we've got introverts and extroverts, and sometimes the extroverts dominate the meetings and the introverts aren't heard, but both may have opinions that are valid to the overall process. And so assuring that the quiet people are heard and feel safe when they speak becomes a critical part of the process. Well, it's like David Smith is back, and David, did you have something to add?
I hope so. I rebooted the modem, and let's see what this does. Is it better, Rob?
Yeah, you're not breaking up at the moment.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I know we've had problems here. I've been in Mexico the last 5 days, and my son called me in the airport yesterday. Dad, I haven't had internet for 24 hours, so I think we've made progress. Yeah, I agree with what I've heard you said and everything. And the one point I'd really like to make as we look at today's topic about how to make society equal is equality comes in many different ways. We equality is wealth, but it's also social, it's racial, it's political, it's educational. It is access to services, it's access to fair reporting of news and many different things. And so we see that. And we also understand the world gender tremendously amplifies inequities too in some parts of the world. And so this topic is a very, very broad one. And as you begin to look at, particularly with some of the stances the United States and others has taken lately, it extends it into many additional areas as too. Uh, and so for example, access to reproductive health care is something that you need to begin to look at. And you're seeing that time and time going there. But to me, what's interesting also is you look at some of the goals. And some of the goals from the United Nations I thought were particularly good on this. And some of these come out of multiple international forums that have been put into place. Some are like how to meet all commitments and obligations to human rights that are agreed in international treaties and conference. Uh, Access to reproductive health information. Reach the poorest countries with life-saving health care. Uh, Provides a social protection floor for the very poor, offering basic income, including basic services. How do you begin to make services available, healthcare services for the elderly, and how do you understand that? And I mean, the list begins to go on and on as you look at these different types of services that
Oops, David froze.
can be brought to bear. But the general, and I think I broke up again there at the end, but you see inequality in many different forms and fashions around the world. And I think that's one of the hardest things that you see in trying to make our society more equal is the cultures are not equal. And you'll never have totally equal equality with all the variations we see there. So equality is going to be one which is handled much more on regional basis than on a true global basis. What do you think, Rob?
Yeah, well, that it trying to do it globally would be, I think, impossible. That the task would be too great for us to accomplish. We would need to accomplish the task certainly on a regional basis, or even on a city-state basis first, and then use that as an example, assuming it was ever done successfully, to change the world. But trying to change all the world populations and deal with all the different religions and government types and the rest. I think as a single project would be something that would extend past lifetimes. But you could certainly fix the problem. At least in theory, you could fix the problem in regions. Certainly at a city level, maybe at a state level. But as we get to larger countries and get to a global arena, it becomes very, very difficult. Mostly, and for a lot of reasons, languages are different. The treatment of the sexes are different. The religious proclivities of different populations are different, and a lot of those things reaffirm a status quo that places one sex as superior to the other, or one race superior to the other, and that all has to be undone. So doing it, attacking the problem perhaps where it's most prevalent first, would be important. But then I still come back to this idea of what really is the equality that we want. Don came up with the point that there aren't a lot of women in at sea level in companies. But I've known a number of women that were sea level, and they either performed poorly, really poorly, or they were pilloried. The Patricia Dunn, who was the the non-executive chairman of Hewlett Packard was just destroyed.
Right. Yeah, it's a good example.
Well, the thing, and she was selected as the chairman because she was the only one that wasn't aligned with one of the two sides, and so she effectively had an entire board that wouldn't listen to anything that she had to say. And then when HP had trouble, the CEO at the time, Mark Hurd, threw her under the bus and this was after she had supported and defended him. And then she died, and then this was all happening while she had cancer, and that exacerbated her cancer and eventually killed her. So I often wonder if rather than trying to force women into certain roles, we don't first try to turn some of those roles into being much more people friendly. Because it really, we go through a lot of issues where we're arguing we ought to have more women in tech, but I continue to hear stories about women that go into tech and they're told that part of their job is to service their manager sexually, which is absolutely inappropriate, and yet even today goes on. So we need to create safe spaces. We need to create protective structures, so that if we're going to put women into jobs where they're currently not well represented, they'll be safe in those jobs. Putting people at risk, at least to me, is not a good way to solve any problem. We need to fix some of the underlying problems first, so that when we say we're going to put you in a job like this, because the story I had about servicing managers, that happened in 2 interviews with a friend of mine's daughter. And if it had been my daughter and this had happened, I probably would have gone postal. So you just can't have environments like this. And so in the end, as we're going to create equality, we really need to, I think, focus on making sure as we go through the transition, the people we're putting into these currently non-equal positions aren't destroyed in the process.
I think that you make some very important points, Rob. And I also would like to add to that again, it comes back to creating a culture that really is inclusive. Because you're right,
Yes.
If a culture is so poisonous that it would create a sort of cancer that could kill you, and I have seen this happen, then there's the problem isn't that the woman's in leadership. The problem isn't that the woman's leading. If all things are equal, the issue is the culture is not making everyone equally accountable for the way that they treat others.
Right.
And I'm 25 years in IT management. When I first entered management, women weren't in the leadership suite. Women weren't managers much at the time that I joined. We just didn't have a place. And I have been very fortunate to work for some extremely progressive companies. And the best manager I ever had at embodying equality was a man that came in, he observed the scenario, the environment, refused to accept any gossip and political backbiting. He says, I'm going to observe for 30 days. 30 days, he would tell people, no, I'm observing. No, I'm observing. On day 35, he came out and said, here's my plan for the organization. Here's the things we're going to need to overcome, and here's what we need to do. When he talked to me about leadership, he had a macro and micro vision, macro, on how we were going to participate. He said, Dawn, I'm worried that you're not tough enough to be able to face the things that happen at this level. And I took it wrong as an early manager. So one of the things that I think also helps, yes, creating a culture and creating mentoring that lets you bring your best authentic self. Because being a good leader does not mean acting like a man. Because if a woman, in most cases, acts like a man would in business with a level of aggression, we're deemed, well, there's words for what we are, but it's not favorable. A man can be assertive, aggressive. A woman cannot. We've got to exercise with more influence. So be our authentic selves, but create a place for ourselves that delivers solutions.
Yeah, I think your point's well taken. The Carly Fiorina, another HP example, was a case in point that she came up and she was brought on board to really shake HP up. She certainly did that, but she showcased much of the problem with women executives of her time and that was you had to be massively self-promoting, and you viewed other women as rivals. And so women executives didn't promote other women executives because it was like there was a quota. And once you made the cut and you were in that executive quota for women, you didn't want to promote another woman up because then she'd take your spot and you wouldn't advance. And Carla Fiorina was one of the cruelest, least supportive CEOs I'd ever seen. And I would put Meg Whitman there right with her. And neither one of them were successful in politics for that very reason. They didn't learn that if you're going to advance, you need to support your supporters. In other words, you need to take care of your people. It's not always just about you. And a good leader leads. They don't just give orders and expect them to be followed. And for both Whitman and Fiorina, they basically managed what was a revolt in their respective companies. But we can go back to Ellen Hancock over at IBM, who I worked under. She was excellent with regard to internal politics. She knew how to play people like a fiddle, but she didn't know the job. And the end result is she was just a failure waiting to happen to somebody. A horrible manager. But really good at politics. Great with regard to taking credit. Not to say that there are a lot of male executives that do the same damn thing where they just take credit for stuff they didn't do. BK over at Intel was kind of famous for that. He took a lot of credit for a bunch of stuff he didn't do, almost sunk the company. So really kind of setting aside and finding a way to promote people based on their assets. Don't turn women into men, and particularly don't turn women into bad men. That would be really wrong. And really setting a standard with regard to management that could be applied to both sexes that highlights their differences in a positive way. I mean, women are supposed to be, in theory, are supposed to be more nurturing than men are. And I would argue that as you get to the C-suite, nurturing is a really important skill. Empathy is an important skill. Yet we often promote people for the very lack of empathy. The number of people that make it into CEO roles that have lost all empathy for their people and believe layoffs are something that you can do as a matter of course. It just amazes me. These people shouldn't be managers of a department, let alone a company. And yet we promote them up and put them in because they are able to just put aside their feelings and do these very hostile things over and over again.
I'm a big fan of Jack Welch's bell curve. You must force to reduce X% of your workforce. That was impractical.
He did forced ranking. Jack was a monster. He did forced ranking. Now there's nothing wrong with forced ranking as far as triage and for company turnaround. But if you institutionalize it, it turns every employee against every other employee. It creates an incredibly hostile environment. And he just went through and destroyed companies.
He did, 100%.
Company, yeah. But
the other thing, though,
go ahead.
Sorry,
the other thing to remember, though, is inequality changes a lot over time, too. I mean, I think one of the biggest inequalities I've seen recently is age discrimination.
Oh, yeah.
And I can tell you that it has gotten rampant, in my opinion, as you see that. And that one's unfortunate is that you see the wisdom often being sacrificed to get lower wages and things because of age discrimination. And that is one that I actually see much more on the uptrend over the last several years than almost any of the other inequalities today. But yet you hear very, very little about it and the others. But I agree with you on the whole area of particularly looking at gender inequality. I can tell you in my decades in business, I've seen that one get a lot better. And I've helped contribute to advancing women in a lot of the companies that I've run and things. And it's really satisfying to see them after they leave, seeing them succeed and knowing that you've had a mentor role in helping that. But one of the biggest things in looking at all these inequalities that we've talked about is the role of people, not organizations, but people helping other people achieve more equality. And the role of a mentor, the role of even an international mentor, cannot be understated as being one of the big strengths that you see in the world today, and that can help solve a lot of these issues. Uh, and to me, it's very interesting. We were in Mexico the last several days, like I mentioned earlier, and just looking at the roles of people and that they do. For example, where we were staying, this particular resort had 4 guards dressed up, long sleeves, long pants, standing on the beach in the heat of the day all day long to keep
Yeah.
people from coming into the resort who were not registered in the resort, and to keep people out of heavy waves. Boy, that was a boring job, and it was one where you know you're in the heat of the day out there too.
Mhm.
Could they probably have gotten more? But no, it satisfied their needs, and you saw that time and time again. Uh, I got up once at probably 4 o'clock in the morning and looked out the window, and there were people who were out raking the beach at 4 o'clock in the morning before everyone got up. Again, is that a job I would want? No, but it's one that met some of the needs, and it provided them some satisfaction because I actually talked with one of them the next day. He says, "Well, this way I can be at home all day long with my family."
Yeah.
And so that was where his care about was. And oftentimes when we look at inequalities, we forget what people care about, and we put our own morals and our own equality and our own judgment of what is good in life on top of everyone else. And everyone is not created equal. Everyone's careabouts are not the same. So it makes this type of question on how do we make our societies more equal one that is really hard to do as a centralized activity, and because it's more regional, it's more personal,
Mhm.
and it's more how you work with those around you, and that's to me the hardest thing in addressing this topic.
Yeah, absolutely. It is tough. Let's go back to mentoring though, because we've had a fairly significant problem with regard to mentoring. Mentoring when I came up in the industry was very common. I was assigned a number of mentors. I came up in IBM was formalized. But the issue with regard to mentoring women in particular has become problematic because men have become concerned that if they mentor a woman and they're in close proximity, they may be accused of behaving inappropriately. And whether that accusation is a real fear or not, it exists in the market. And the issue we've got, I think, right now is we're not really doing a good job of training people how to be mentors. I mean, in fact, I don't know of a single program right now that is broadly held that trains people how to be mentors. Understand some of the issues. If you're a man mentoring a young woman, there are precautions you need to take. I mean, the having her over to the house when your wife's away for dinner, probably not a wise move, regardless of the underlying intent. It's going to look bad. The late night meetings in the hotel room after work. Yeah, I don't care if it was started off being innocent. You don't do this stuff. But when somebody does, and then they get accused of behaving inappropriately, the message kind of goes out. Well, you can't really mentor women because people are going to accuse you of doing something wrong, even when you didn't. And that's not the case. You have to avoid the appearance of doing anything inappropriate. And if that's not drilled in early on, you're going to make mistakes, and those mistakes will damage the overall process. Mentoring is an important. It's critical to bringing people up in this industry. But if we've got women that don't want to mentor other women because they're afraid they'll become rivals, and men that don't want to mentor women because they're afraid that they're going to be accused of behaving inappropriately, then you've got a real problem with getting mentors for women because you've just wiped out both sexes. So I think part of the issue is making mentoring a requirement of anybody that is senior. You should have a mentoring requirement, something that is part of your job that you regularly. And number two, you get trained in how to mentor. The things to avoid, the issues to watch out for. Because in a mentoring situation, either side of the mentoring situation could become attracted to the other, and that can create an almost immediate problem. But there are ways to deal with that. First, you surface it, say, I'm starting to have feelings for you, whatever, and maybe we ought to just pull back and reassess the relationship as opposed to power through, or worse, do something that's gonna cost one or both of you a job. So in the end, it's something that is manageable. It's something that doesn't necessarily have to be avoided, but I do think it's something that should be part of a requirement for a senior employee to do. And number two, should come with a certain amount of training so that known mistakes aren't made and careers destroyed.
I think that part of that is governance and culture.
Exactly.
I've been very fortunate at Sun Microsystems. Well, in my entire life, the most influential leader that I've ever worked with is Rob Gielan, my manager at Sun. And the thing that made him so good is, first of all, you would never think about a nefarious situation if you conduct yourself as a professional. There's a lot of people that do stupid stuff. Don't be stupid, that's rule one. And yes, you can govern that, but you can't stop people from choosing to be stupid. But my manager allowed me the space. He would challenge me to do things that I didn't think I was capable of doing, but he knew I was. He would allow me to make mistakes and not make it such a negative thing. And he would provide corrective feedback after I made a mistake. He would guide me to, next time, let's try this. Strategies to improve myself. So it was real feedback. It was professional feedback. And the growth I experienced working under somebody, gender aside, leadership was it. I have mentored other women, and I've been mentored by women that we have to make decisions about how we're going to work. Post-COVID, one of the things David talked about the importance of health and community social issues has been exacerbated by a post-COVID world. We didn't just put masks on our face, we put masks on our heart. We went into self-preservation mode in business where we don't have those conversations that we used to have about how we can improve. We stopped short of making progress. And in fact, in some ways, I'd like to assert that we've lost progress, David, to what you were talking about. Women are not, I heard United Nations, one of the leaders of the United Nations said it would take like 230 more years to achieve gender parity. And I think that that's not, it doesn't have to be that way. But we have to recognize where we are. And where we are post-pandemic is what you had talked about, Rob, which is the importance of compassionate caring. That's a heart-to-heart job. We've got to be able to connect to people in a way that we understand and get the feedback, even though we're over a camera instead of face-to-face. We have to be able to pick up those clues. And we got to care about how we lead with managing the interference and achieving the goals. It's a balance of we have to balance the human side again, because post-COVID, a lot of things are harder. And one of the things that's gotten harder, especially, take a very specific demographic now. In the Asian culture, if you are a woman in IT from Asia, it is expected, if you're in the United States, that you're going to work for the lowest dollar. Below your Indian counterparts, below your male counterparts, you are supposed to work for the bottom dollar. So gender and regional equality for a woman in IT is horrifying. So these issues exist. We need to recognize they exist, and we need to work through them. I've been very fortunate in my career. Great leaders, great companies. I've worked for some of the best companies in the world, and that has inspired me. But I've also seen people that are working so hard to hold on to their leadership role that they have become micromanagers. They're not able to engage their team, to build the trust that really fuels growth. That's what we need to work on, and that's where mentoring comes in.
Yeah, that can be problematic. A lot of the issue you're talking about is just people not really understanding how salaries work. Compensation was well studied back in the 60s by Hertzberg and Maslow, and the fact is money is a crap motivator, but it is really good at demotivating people. If
It
people
is.
find out being underpaid,
Comparative,
being
yes.
underpaid, they'll stop you. If you really want to screw up a company, just cut everybody's salary by 10%. You'll bring it to a screeching halt. Conversely, if you were to increase everybody's salary by 10%, there probably would be no measurable change in output. So when you have a situation like this where you are endemically underpaying a particular demographic, just the people should recognize they're destroying the productivity of that demographic. You're being penny wise and pound foolish. And so if you can just drive through current compensation theory and make it so managers understand that they're doing themselves harm by implementing these practices, it could be problematic. I will say one thing though, because when I started off in tech, I was massively underpaid, and that's because when I came in the job, they based my salary on what I was paid before, and I came out of retail, and you don't make a lot of money in retail, and so I probably made about half of what somebody else with a master's degree starting where I did made. But the difference is that put me below the range of the salary for my job. And that meant that even though everybody I worked with was getting no raises, no increases, I got the maximum raise. I really had nothing to do with my performance. I was below range. And so every year I got a 10 to 15% raise, and everybody else is not getting anything. And I got to tell you, even though I was used to living on not a lot of money, and getting a 10 to 15% raise every year, it was like Christmas every year. And other people, they were unhappy because they weren't getting raises, and costs were going up, and they were having trouble paying their bills. And yet, because I'd set at a much lower salary level, those increases were just mammoth for me. And so even though I made less, I think my quality of life was higher because I started off underpaid, and because the computer looked at where I was paid against the range and just said, he's under, we got to fix this. We'll give the guy the maximum raise. And it were actually, for those years that I was out of range, I turned out I was a lot happier than my peers that didn't get raises at all. So there's certainly ways to look at this to say that sometimes maybe the inequality in the system, assuming that there's a programmatic way to fix the inequality, can work to your benefit. It did work, at least from terms of quality of life, not spendability, obviously, but quality of life. I didn't have the problems that others did, where they bought houses they probably couldn't afford, and then they didn't get raises, and they were constantly living paycheck to paycheck. We stayed in an apartment for a long period of time after other people had houses. We had income surpluses every year, and didn't have the same kind of financial pressures that a lot of my peers did, that had the Porsches and the big houses and the rest of the stuff. And it made for an interesting experience. And once again, goes back to when we're trying to fix a problem, making sure that we're looking at the quality of life aspects, and our fix isn't destroying one thing to correct another. So we're correcting a salary issue, but we're destroying quality of life in the process. And make sure that the approach is holistic. The goal is to improve quality of life. The goal isn't necessarily to create a bunch of people that are living in McMansions that can't afford what the hell it is they've got.
If you're holding on to something desperately and your knuckles are turning white, maybe the problem is that you're holding on to something so tight.
Right.
The best thing that I have done from the pandemic is learning a certain degree of incredible flexibility. What do I need in my life? Well, I need a roof over my head. I need to be able to buy food. I need to take care of my family. That's what it comes down to. Doesn't need to be top dollar. I don't need everything. I just need my family, my friends, my connection. And I do find I'm much healthier when I'm doing a little bit too much work.
Yeah, it seems that way. The work keeps you engaged. David, you had a comment to make?
Well, I did have a couple in there. I think that the dialogue has been really interesting on this, because this is a topic where the answers are all different shades of gray.
Yep.
And there's really very few black and whites in this discussion. And we've done a pretty good job of surfacing where the boundaries are between some of the zones. And I think that is one of the best things we could do in a global broadcast like this, is help surface some of those boundary conditions. And as I look at some of the other elements, though, it's as you look at the income base for people who speak different languages. You look at the income level that says, is the economy fair? And in those economies, are people given a fair chance? And I have to look at that with my North American hat on. But I can tell you when I go to some countries, like if I'm in Italy, if I'm in Brazil, if I'm in uh, Venezuela, if I'm in parts of Mexico and things, I'm going to use a term here. Those are patron societies where the families are the most important things. And if you're not in the right family, you're the equality you have is very much driven by which family you're in and the
Right.
relationships
Right.
those families have.
Sure.
And so that's another area where you look at equality. Can we do anything on a regulatory level to change that? No. That's something that has to change with culture. That's something that has to change with time as you begin to go. So in societies like that, some of the best things you can do is do it. The other thing, Don, I want to mention is you talked about the differences in salaries in IT. Well, that's in most industries too,
True.
and some of it, I will have to admit, I use developers around the world, and I use developers everywhere. And
Mhm.
do I use them sometimes because of cost differentials? Yes.
Of course.
I mean, I live in Austin, Texas, and
Mhm.
I'm sorry, our developers cost a lot here. Are they good? Yes,
Right.
they're good. If I go to Silicon Valley, developers cost more there, things.
Right.
Uh, but on the other hand, I also use developers around the world to take advantage of the clock. So if I have developers who are developing in Europe, they hand off to my developers over in our time zones here, not just the United States, but I have developers in Brazil and Costa Rica, in Puerto Rico, Colombia, as well as the United States. But then we hand off to our QA team in Vietnam.
Yes. I think
So
that this
that
is a
when we get
beautiful thing.
back
Yeah.
into the development cycle, everything has gone through that, and we're using 24 hours of the day intelligently to speed up our sprint cycles and things.
And
Now,
you're using the best. Yeah.
am I taking advantage of people in other cultures? Yes. Am I taking advantage of lower cost? Yes. But am I doing it in a fair and equitable manner? Yes, because the cultures are different. You know,
And that's a good
if
thing. If we're embracing global equality, there's a reason why we go to Europe and um, Vietnam and these other places. That inclusion creates opportunity for everybody. It
oh,
does
it
raise
does. It does. I had a fantastic development team in Ukraine working
Mhm.
on one of our projects. We had 9 people. Unfortunately, when the war broke out, they went away, and half of that development team has been killed, which is really sad. But
Yeah.
you see things like that. They had some good ones. Some of my best data scientists are actually in Greece,
Of course. Yeah.
and
There's a huge pocket in
you see
Europe.
them. And we're doing a lot of development in Unity, which is one of the gaming developments, but we're doing an education product. Well, I can get fantastic Unity developers in Western Europe uh, that are twice as good as Unity developments that cost twice as much here.
Right.
So you begin to see it, and so this is a hard one in some ways because we're creating the opportunities, we're giving them mobility, they are learning a lot. I can tell you, for example, my teams I have here in Costa Rica, in Colombia, in Brazil, they all complement. We're helping them learn, we're helping them in advance as
It's
they're
the
providing the service.
partnership. It's the
And so
partnership and the problems we solve. Yeah.
we're doing a form of mentorship to them as they're learning too. So those are the things which I think are real important as you look at this question. Um, and it's not, again, it's not the black and white I was mentioned at the start of this. This is a gray area. And a lot of this works in the grays because if I took a pure black and white approach, every one of those developers should be paid the same. And that's just
I
not the
don't
way
think that
that
that's
it works.
realistic. Right. I I think the thing that I really love about IT, and I chose IT for a reason. Nothing else has the level of global inclusion that IT does. This is my opinion. Nothing else requires so much. Yes, there's global leveling on a region. If you are a, however, if you are an Indian woman director in Silicon Valley, you shouldn't expect to be paid what you were in Delhi,
Right.
Mumbai. So I love the global nature of our business. I have been in the communities of best practice through IT Service Management Forum, which is global, and Help Desk Institute, also global. We worked on creating the standards that originated out of Europe, ITIL. We worked on socializing them worldwide. There's global implications and there's regional cost uplifts or down levels, depending on where you're from. But it's that robust solution that comes from people coming together from all different regions to solve problems the best that they can. We uplift one another through that. And that's what I love about our industry.
I do wonder, though, when we talk about regional salaries and compensations, there's certainly been practices, I believe, with both Google and Facebook, where employees move to a lower cost of living area. They moved to reduce the compensation of those employees because the companies knew that they weren't carrying as much cost. And as soon as you change the mechanism for compensation from merit-based, in other words, compensation for the job, and you now make adjustments which result in higher profit for the company based on other things. So an unmarried woman gets less money than a married man might get because one's got a family they're supporting and the other one does not, which was a common practice back when I was younger. The both are doing the same job. One is being paid more for it and not for anything they're contributing to the job. The single woman might actually be a higher producer than the man is, yet she's going to be underpaid because management has decided that her financial requirement is lower. But when you start tying compensation to financial requirements and take it away from the value of the job, that is inherently, at least to the worker, appears inherently unfair. If I'm producing at X percentage and I move from Silicon Valley to Arizona and I'm still producing X percentage, from my standpoint, I think I should be paid the same. I'm contributing the same, so therefore I should be paid the same. And if the company says, well, no, your costs are lower, you have a lower cost of living, so we're going to reduce your salary. Invariably, if they do that to me, my productivity is going to fall as a result. That's compensation theory. So the practice does harm to the very thing you're trying to promote, which is productivity. You want every employee to optimally be productive. That's what you're paying for. And so some of these practices that create disparities for locations are inherently problematic if those employees find out that they're being paid less than their peers, particularly if they find out that they're actually working harder than the peers that are being paid more. That can be a corrupting influence in terms of how satisfied the job. Yeah, very, very demotivating. And it seems unfair, and it often happens to women because there are all kinds of justifications for why you should be able to pay women less. And none of them, to my knowledge, hold any water. That you should be compensated based on the value that you provide. The other aspects of that, unless you're trying to make up for an individual hardship, which is something you have to consider. Somebody suddenly has a major catastrophe in their life that hurts their capability. If the company wants to step forward and help the employee out, I don't necessarily have a problem with that. But conversely, if somebody has a lower cost of living, they live frugally, they shouldn't be punished by having a lower salary just because they found a way to live more frugally. There are inequities that are built into the system that I think overall need to be eliminated, and that compensation should reflect what we know about compensation theory, and that means you're paid a fair wage based on the product you produce. And if you do something that reduces your value to the company, then that's a valid reason to reduce your salary. But if you do something that just reduces your your personal cost with no impact on the company, then that shouldn't have an impact on your compensation one way or the other. Same thing as if you suddenly go out and buy a McMansion you can't afford, walking to your boss and say, hey, I need a raise to pay for my house and my Porsche. That's probably not a good justification for a raise either.
That's not a good position.
It's certainly been done.
Right. Today, with the layoff culture that has just started like last fall, I think that the holding on to my assets and not losing everything I worked so hard for certainly becomes a factor. I was a Silicon Valley IT professional, and I saw what was happening in the economy. As a consultant, my jobs come and go. If I have any duration of time where I'm not working, I'm in trouble. It's very simple, though. If rents in California are $5,000 a month and rents here in Chicago, Illinois are $800 a month, okay, that's not a hard decision for me if I can keep a steady stream of income. So yeah, if we make decisions to move ourselves, yes, some companies are going to, re-level based on where you're located, and other companies are going to realize if my contribution is always going to be here, whether I'm in Chicago, I mean, what's the difference between me keeping a post office box in California to keep my income?
It shouldn't have an impact on your income if it has no impact on the company. Conversely, of course, if it does, in other words, if you move to Chicago and you're doing a job that somebody was making $800 an hour for doing in Chicago, then that's a consideration you probably should make when you're making a move, because invariably they're going to adjust you to market. But now that everybody can work remotely, or almost everybody can work remotely, in theory, a lot of us can provide the same level of performance regardless where we live, whether we live in California, we live in Tahiti. It shouldn't really make a difference, but that all has to be factored in. And really, as companies look at the compensation levels for people, they do it at their very heart need to understand how the compensation impacts the people that they're dealing with. If you mentioned we've got kind of a layoff culture right now, there've been an excessive number of layoffs. But layoffs are a triage practice that should only be used if a company's at risk of failing. The collateral damage to a layoff is significant. It breaches trust with the employees in the company. Often your most productive employees will choose, a lot of them will choose to voluntarily leave because you change the environment for them, and they're high value, so they get recruited out. And the people that are left are often those that don't feel that they can get a job anyplace else, and now you're left with a bunch of disgruntled employees who feel undervalued and underappreciated, and now you've got a real culture problem that you've created with regard to implying the layoffs. People shouldn't be treated like machines. People are people, and that means when you're removing their compensation, you need to do so with care and empathy, and not just say, "Hey, screw you guys, you're all unemployed, have a nice life." That just doesn't end well. I think it is incredibly ironic that Carly Fiorina's California loss when she ran for Congress was the equivalent number to the people and the families that she laid off while she was in. Was the CEO of HP in California, almost to the number, and showcasing that, at least potentially, that people have long memories, and if you screw them over like that, they're probably going to find a way to screw you over if they're given the opportunity. That's all collateral damage. It's all avoidable mistakes. Just need to treat people with empathy. I remember at IBM, when we did our first layoff, so IBM at that point had been an employer for life, one of the last ones in existence. And when we did the layoffs, people who were being laid off were immediately removed from the site. They were taken to another site. They were given an office, and their salaries were continued with 3 months. And they were told that your job for the next 3 months is simply to find yourself another job in IBM, outside of IBM. But you're going to be paid for 3 months, given an office, given resources, given all the counseling that you could possibly want, and we're going to help you find. Now, that's, to my knowledge, has been rarely done, but they treated the employees with compassion, and I think virtually every one of them that were treated that way still left with a pretty good feeling about the company that they were removed from, as opposed to other layoffs where people came in, they were locked out of their office, they couldn't go in, and hey, here's your severance package, bye-bye. and I still remembered a CIO that was laid off over email, who logged back into his company and basically deleted every single database and file in the firm, putting the firm effectively out of business. Now he went to prison and clearly was sued into
accountable for the stupid mistakes.
but it all could have been avoided if the CEO had simply sat him down, said, "Here's what's going on. You've been with the company for 20 years. We got to let you go. Here are the reasons, and we'll give him the same compensation package, but treat him like a human being, not send an email saying, bye, fella, you no longer work here."
I work for Sun, which, as everybody knows, most people know, after the World Trade Center bombings, the economic impact on our business, which had a building in World Trade Center too,
Sure.
we had to lay off by the following month. We already were having problems, but they were exacerbated by that event. So one of the things Sun did well, in my opinion, is they did have we had a great amount of compassion about how we did this. And the employee loyalty was, even though we knew at the end of this, our jobs were going away, most of us were very committed to, okay, what can we do to do this right while we're doing it? We created a network, because people do matter, for jobs and career professionals that were laid off. I helped voluntarily help people find jobs after they left Sun, because it was the right thing to do. If they mattered before they were working with me,
take care of the people.
Yeah. Today, that network, I created 2 networks, one network to support it and one network to support our job seekers. The Recruiters Network is an 80,000 member recruiter network today. And the Job Seeker Network, we just, share the opportunity, build somebody up. Everybody, you find a job through that network. If a fraction of them offer opportunities to hire and put more people back to work, guess what? We're creating a culture of caring that continues to feed even in hard times.
People taking care of other people, and if you were ever laid off or whatever, that same network would help you as well. So there is a benefit to doing this that is potentially selfish in nature. You're helping others, but it also assures that if you need help, those others will be there for you as well.
I know of 8 people that have been through the network that have not only found jobs, but they ended up hiring a half a dozen people from the network. 8 times 6, one person, that's huge benefit. And it all is about not just taking care of myself. If I'm taking care of you, I'm taking care of me too.
It removes a lot of the stress of life is what it does, is because you know that there are people for you, and kind of the dog eat dog nature of most businesses, it offsets that significantly.
On the other hand, there is something to say for how people view you as leaders as well. I've had multiple employees who have followed me across 3 or 4 companies.
Of course.
And, I love that. It makes me feel good. But on the other hand, they like working with you. They like the way you're treated, or like the way you mentor them. You like the other elements like that. And do I feel bad for the company that I left and they left? A little bit, but not really. No, a little bit. But it's all your personal feelings. It's your personal experiences, and that's why equality has to take that personal view to it and how it works there. And Rob, since you're the moderator, I will tell you, I'm actually interviewing a front-end developer in Brazil on top of the hour. I'm going to have to jump off to go and interview that person. And let me see if I can get my Brazilian Portuguese working a little bit. But no, this to me, this is actually just another example of where we are beginning to move. I'm interviewing 3 front-end developers today, and they're in 3 different countries. Mm-hmm. And I love the fact that you can be this global and work on products at the same time. And this is one of the things I think it's helping leveling the world out more, is be able to have this type of opportunity globally to do these things. And so, Rob, Don, I see Dr. Sharif's back. Thank you, but I am going to have to jump off to do this interviews. Wish me luck with these developers. Thank y'all.
Good luck, and if you don't
Best
get
of
them,
luck.
let me know. I know a lot of global developers that are excellent in looking now. We appreciate your input, though. You're awesome, David.
Thank you.
We probably should start wrapping up anyway. We're coming up to the top of the hour, and I think we had a really good discussion.
I agree.
Dr. Sharif, you want to close this off? Or not?
Maybe Dr. Sharif is frozen.
He's back.
Hello. Yes.
Hi.
No, I'm not. I'm not. Yeah, the session is finished.
Yep, we're ready for you to close off.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Oh, I can answer this. I can answer this one question.
Thank you.
Quickly.
Thank you for joining today's sessions and.
Or not.
We have a
Yeah,
question
sure.
from Jason.
I thought I'd answer the question. What's forced ranking? Forced ranking was a system that Jack Welch came up with at General Electric that resulted from what was a programmatic set of raises and promotions that were going on at GE, irrespective of performance. And so forced ranking takes and makes every manager look at his staff and rank them the best to worst. So you've got a top 10%, you've got a bottom 10%, and in theory, you get rid of the bottom 10% on the cycle. And so what it does when you've got an issue like he had at GE is it forces the company to get rid of the underperformers, and certainly was appropriate given the way the culture was at GE. The problem with forced ranking is if you leave it in place, it means everybody's competing with everybody else. So I'm not going to help Bill who's struggling because I want him to be on that bottom 10% because I don't want to get laid off or fired. Right. So it creates an issue where the top performers aren't helping the lower performers at all because they want to maintain their top performer status. And the lower performers are always at risk of being fired and never can dig out. And so it creates this nasty environment where people are stabbing each other in the back. Employees are speaking out against other employees and turning them in to make sure they're not the ones that are laid off in the next cycle. It nearly destroyed Silicon Valley, and it's taken years to try to get it out.
And then his other question was, how do we insult you?
How do we insult you?
Your shirt. What's the rest of your shirt say? That was Jason's other question.
What does it say? Yeah, there's more to it. Hang on, let me stand up. There's a full-on saying here. So can you see it?
Must value your good one.
Okay, there we go. We can close off and call it a morning.
Yep.
Dr. Sharif,
We
go ahead.
value your opinion, Noel.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is excellent discussion. I enjoyed a lot as an audience. This is excellent discussion, and thank you, Mr. Rob. You've done an excellent job as a moderator, and thank you, Simons Khan.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes,
I think you right now I'm in Dhaka. You visited Dhaka?
Oh, nice. Follow.
Oh, yeah.
Good follow.
Yes, and actually from World Talent Economy Forum, Mr. Home Stoner with his team, they are also visiting Dhaka this 10th April to 12th April. There is a very, very exclusive event in Dhaka with our team. I want to invite you all in our organizations, and hopefully you will enjoy. I think Simon has organization in Dhaka, right?
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
I have teams in India and Dhaka.
Yeah, I know you have. And Mr. Rob, hopefully you and your family will visit Dhaka. Definitely we can organize a very exclusive programs and event for you in Bangladesh. And also Mr. Tom Rose, he's also visiting Dhaka coming 17 April to 21 April. So there are a lot of interesting things happening from World Talent Economy Forum. We are collaborating with largest universities, and we are collaborating with public-private partnership authorities. We are working with different interesting organization, corporations, and hopefully your support can help us a lot. We need more of your guideline, more of your support, and it will be interesting project for all of us. So thank you for joining today's sessions. Tomorrow we have very, very special episode on Nikola Tesla Technology conference. So hopefully everyone will join. Thank you. Bye-bye and take care.
Bye-bye.